Welcome! In this video I will be exploring 4 different ideas or 4 different things that stop people from pursuing something creative, and with me in this video I have Frank James of the Frank James channel.
Hey everyone!
We've talked about this a little bit in depth and we wanted to share 4 ideas and what we can do about them in our creative processes. One of the reasons I reached out to Frank is because he has talked on his channel a lot about creative pursuits and like how to make creativity a part of your life. And Frank, would you mind sharing with us what it is that you've done in terms of creativity and like what kinds of things you've done?
Sure, yeah. I have a YouTube channel, so there's the big one. I've just dabbled in all kinds of stuff. I've done a lot of theater, I've done playwriting, I've done a lot of narrative writing, and I'll pretty much try my hand at anything once. So I just enjoy taking something that was in my imagination and putting it into reality somehow, you know?
I if you don't know me, I also have a YouTube channel. I write a new
You're
song.
on it.
Yeah, this is my YouTube channel. I have written a new song most weeks during the time that I've had a YouTube channel, and I also have pursued a lot of creative paths as well as a musician and as a visual artist. So I thought that this topic would be a really appropriate one for my channel and for people who are interested in trying something new and going down a creative path. So I thought it would be worth taking the time to explore what stops people from making this a real part of your life. So Frank and I have talked about a couple things that stop people, and the first thing that we talked about is the fear of making a mess of some kind.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we get started on or not even get started, before we even started, because that's what we're talking about. What stops people from getting started? You have this idea in your mind and you're like, oh man, this is so good. Like I'm gonna write a song and it's gonna move everybody and they're gonna be weeping,
Yeah.
from the emotions that I make them feel. But then you sit down at, a piano, and maybe even before you touch the keys, you're like, there's no way I'm ever going to get this down the way it is in my mind. So you're like, oh, it's just going to be a big mess, and I can't get it perfect. I can't write the Moonlight Sonata on my first try. And you know that, and it stops you from starting because you don't want to make that mess,
Yeah, there's a big fear of wasting time. But in reality, when you're exploring a creative discipline, at least in my experience, there's something to be learned from any experience, even if it is it's something brand new that you're exploring.
Well, Stephanie, I'm sure you've sat down to write a song. You said you wrote a song every week. I bet there was some in there where you're like, well, that was absolute garbage. That was a big mess. Do you think that even though you wrote that song that was awful, do you think you should have never started on it?
For me, it's something that needed to be explored. I think if I'm starting to pursue a path, I think it's worth the time that it takes to explore what's there. Because I've also experienced the opposite, where I have started going down a path that I didn't really feel that strongly about and then found a lot of value there. Yeah, you never know what you're going to discover when you start something like that, or when you start working on something. It's always going to be a mystery and surprise.
Right, and the other thing is, even if let's say you make something that's a bunch of garbage, you write a song that you're like, but maybe there is something in there that you're like, there's just like one little phrase, this musical phrase that I really like. Now I can maybe use that somewhere else, or a line of the words, at least something good that you can pull out of it. Even though there is a mess, maybe there's some kind of hidden jewel in there. Maybe not, but but a lot of times, even though the whole overall product maybe isn't doing much for you, there's a little part that you can reuse later.
I actually wrote a song about that very concept too, because
yeah?
just called Buried Gold, where you don't know what it's gonna be, and maybe it's gonna be nothing, or maybe it'll be something. We just have no idea until we try it out.
Right, because it's a big mystery. You don't know.
So even if you're having those kinds of fear of like making a mess or using up time and resources for something that might not be that valuable or might not seem that valuable, there's always something to be learned from the experience. For me, at least, that segues really nicely into the second idea we talked about, which is the fear that I'm supposed to be doing something else. Like I'm not using my time wisely because I'm working on this creative pursuit instead of doing something like the dishes or something like that.
Well, when you're doing something creative, there's really no immediate payoff, except for the congratulations you can give yourself on finishing something, I mean, maybe in the future you could play a song for someone that you've written or show someone something a story that you've written. But if you spend 2 hours creating a work, it's not the same as spending 2 hours cleaning your garage out, because, if you clean your garage, you can just drive your car right in, immediate gratification, the fruits of your labor pay off. But with creativity, it's like, I'm not sure what this is really doing. That logical, pragmatic voice can really talk you out of a lot.
It's a little bit weird when you're engaged in a lot of different practices. Like, for example, in my own life, I practice meditating, I practice my trumpet, I practice, there's a lot of like things that are routines that go into my teaching practice. And so when I sit down to do something creative, it does have to be within a certain boundary. If you're in practice with your creative work, you can kind of get an idea of what's going to come out of that period of time, but you can't always know what exactly you're going to get out of that time. So there's a little bit of that fear of, I'm not exactly sure if this is a good use of my time, when I know for a fact that when I practice trumpet, I'm going to get this much done. Or when I practice meditation, I'm going to be this much farther meditated.
Yeah, exactly, because there are no guarantees when it comes to creativity. And plus, there's just so many other things to be done. You were telling me earlier when we were discussing these things, an interesting story of you were coming up with reasons why you couldn't, was it practice or was it write music, something? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, when I was in my trumpet lesson a couple weeks ago, I was talking to my trumpet teacher about why I didn't quite have the time to practice 2 hours a day. Because like to any musician, 2 hours is a really long time to be practicing. And I thought, well, that's a really long time when I work full time. I'm not a music student anymore. I have a lot of stuff going on. And as I was listening to my teacher out loud, the things that I was doing in my time instead, it sounded more and more ridiculous that I wasn't using that time to practice, because obviously I was using his time to learn the trumpet. And I guess actionable advice, I would say, for that kind of situation is to just sit and talk out loud and say out loud the reasons why you can't do something, and listen to how silly it sounds. I mean, that helped me, because getting better at my horn is really important to me. It's a top priority. So if pursuing something creative is a top priority for you, I would say a really good idea, a really good exercise is to just list the reasons that you're not going to do those things today, and listen to how silly that sounds.
If you do have some good things, some good reasons to not be creative, you're like, man, I really have a lot of chores to do today. You can always just say, okay, well then I'll schedule the time to be creative and do it all in that chunk. Maybe it's only 10 minutes, but at least I'll get it out of the way. And if you can also prioritize being creative, like it's sort of like if you think of exercise, like running, you can say, well, this is pointless. I'll be running for an hour, but I won't get anywhere. You know, it's like I'll just be stuck on a treadmill. But creativity is sort of like exercise in the sense of, even if you're not practicing, even if, let's say, you're writing a song because you want to write a song, in some ways it is still an exercise. It is still practice, and you need to put in that time doing those creative pursuits in order to eventually do what you want to do better and faster, save time. And so if you can prioritize it like that, like I just need to do this for the sake of doing it because it will make me better at it, then it's easier to carve that time out and put off doing the dishes for a few minutes, you know?
I agree with that, and I would say that is a doable thing for myself. I do carve out that about 2 hours every Sunday afternoon between when I get home from my rehearsal and then when I do my live stream. I'm like, this is my creative block. I am going to work within this time and see what I get done. And the more you do it, the more practiced you are at it, the more easily it flows, and it is a practice. It's definitely something that if you make it a priority, it will become easier.
It's easier to get into a flow once you've gotten into it many times before, you know? Not as much as of a fight to get there.
Right. So we've talked about motivation, and we talked about, you know, reasons to start and get moving with your creative pursuits, and what happens now once you have a product, once you have something that, you know, that might be shown off to the world. What is going to stop people from sharing that, and what is going to stop people from, again, even starting? Really, a thing that I get a lot from especially adults is feeling like if they created something, if they made something, it's not going to be good enough. It's not going to be a masterpiece right away. And that's a tough one because, yeah, you know, if you're not a professional writer or professional musician, or, you know, you're just starting out on something, it's not going to be that good at first. And it's probably not going to be what you want it to be at first.
That's a bit of acceptance you have to put in at the beginning that, oh man, I this is going to feel like a lot of wasted time because I'm not going to be an instant genius at this craft that I'm pursuing, you know?
That kind of makes it sound like, well, what's even the point? But I'm here to say that the point is it makes you happy and you have something to speak for. You have something that is that's all yours. Feeling like the work itself is not going to be good enough or representative of what you actually want to say, which, I mean, that just goes back to making it a routine, making it a practice, because those feelings are founded. You're gonna be new to your craft. Everyone is new to their craft at some point.
Right, exactly. The other thing is, what's funny, you've probably experienced this before, is that you're not even that good of a judge of how good or bad your stuff is. Because, sure, maybe you can write a song, write a short story that you know as soon as you finish it is terrible. But haven't we all had that creative thing we've done where we're like, oh man, this is so great, and then like a month later you look at it and you're like, that was awful, why did I think that was good? So that's just to point out you don't necessarily know what is good or bad. And so yeah, when you start off anything, you're gonna be bad at it at first, but there is that element of if it's something that you really want to do, like in your soul, it's the thing that you'll keep doing even when you know it's bad, or even you'll trick yourself into thinking you're good at it when you're not. And finding that part of it that you really love and you keep going to it, even though you know you're not good at it. We only can see, when there are artists that we admire, we only see the best stuff that they've produced, that they've decided to put out, but it gives us the illusion that when people are good at something, everything they put out is gold. But, you know, we never saw the songs that the Beatles wrote that they didn't think were good enough to record. You know, we only see the ones that made it to the end. And so give yourself the same space to write stuff that no one else will see.
I mean, something that I'm trying to do with my channel as well is just to show the good and the bad and the ugly.
yeah.
Like I'm at least trying to like, I'm just trying to show, yes, this is a process. This is something that anyone can do. I would, of course, I love expressing myself through music, but not all of the music is that good. And I understand that, and I'm okay with that, and I'm hoping my audience understands that as well, or learns to understand that about me. I want to put as much as I can out there because it's an important practice to myself.
Right. Well, that's great that you're doing that, because you don't see a lot of that, like seeing an artist process. If you want to, it's difficult if you want to find, for instance, a novelist and see how bad was their first draft really. It's like you don't know because they don't publish the first draft. And that goes back to our first thing about making a mess, is that you can make a mess at first and clean it up later. You might not be good enough on your first draft, your first go around on something, but you can always keep working on it. And so it's good that you're reminding people of that the first time through when you're writing a song is going to be pretty bumpy,
I felt like when we had this conversation before, it led into our fourth point, which is the things that stop people from pursuing something creative is the fear of judgment from other people, fear of whatever I have is not going to be good enough. And, that might be true or it might not be true. Like, I really don't know. We have no way of gauging, like, what is actually good enough because it's so subjective what we're making. Like, we're the only ones that know the full journey of whatever thing we're creating. So it's hard to know what people will think when they see a finished product.
If you're in rehearsal for a play and you see what the actors all went through to get to their final performance, and you know what the set looks like from behind, and you know how, everything was put together, it's a lot less impressive, and you really just see all the flaws that are still in it. But if you have an audience member who's coming in, this is the first time they've seen any of it, it's like, whoa, man, look at all this. Look at how it all came together. They don't see the process, that's a really good point you make, Stephanie, is that when you are so intimately involved with how every note in a song was written, you see it under a magnifying glass that other people just will never see through.
Yeah, and actually the opposite is true as well. Being a beginning band teacher, seeing kids from the very first time they take the instrument out of the case through the course of the year and until like from September until May, there is a huge amount of progress that nobody sees, and their concert at the end of the year is not going to look like much, cause
you get hot cross buns maybe.
Yeah, hot cross buns, and then it's like you hear every instrument playing hot cross buns, and it's like,
nice.
Well, adults looking, they're like, well, big deal, you can play 6 notes. To us, it's a huge deal that they can play 6 notes because we were all there and we were all, working on it together, and the kids had invested so much time into putting this together. So we just don't know as spectators or as consumers of art that we don't know what kind of work was put into it.
That's true.
That's why art has more intrinsic value than a lot of people think, because I think like people forget about the process and how valuable that is to the human experience, as opposed to, yes, consuming the product. The product is great, but the process is really what gives it human value.
Like when you see a really detailed painting, it's just, part of the awe of it is just thinking, man, all the work that went into it, which makes it more special, because it was labored over with love for so long, Like going back to feeling like the work isn't good enough, there was a song that I wrote last summer that I just thought was not good. I just didn't really like it that much, and it was my vulture song. And it was about like, you look at the bird, it's so big,
but it's just a vulture, because you're disappointed. And when I wrote the song, I was feeling disappointed about the song. And my friend, who also is a songwriter, Catfish Jones, he was like, maybe sometimes the song is just a vulture. Like, also, other people were looking at it thinking that's a great song. Other people were hearing it thinking that's a really good song, because I don't know, I just personally didn't like it that much, but I felt the need to explore it and to just see it through. And in the end, people liked it. So.
Right. Just because there's stuff that doesn't have a lot of value to you doesn't mean that other people won't love it. There are tons of examples of songwriters and just novel writers who hated something that they produced, but everyone loves it. You just never know.
Those kinds of fears of judgment and feeling like something that you create is not going to be good enough, it shouldn't be a hindrance to just trying to do it anyway, because you need it, or I don't know what you need, but I need it, and a lot of people need it, and people like the creative process is a really special one that I, as an arts educator at least, believe everyone should have the experience of. Whether or not the actual product is good is irrelevant. I mean, of course we want to be better at the craft, but everyone has an individual journey. Everyone has something that is unique that they offer, and it's worth the time it takes to explore it.
Just creativity for creativity's own sake is really important. And yeah, so I mean, obviously a lot of us want the validation of an audience, but don't think too much about that element when you're creating, because when you're doing that part of it, it's just for you. It's expressing yourself. And maybe no one else will like it. Who cares? It's not about them when you're creating it.
I want to thank Frank James for coming on my channel and having this conversation with me. I hope that our conversation has at least helped encourage you to start something creative or start something that you've wanted to pursue. If you're a follower on my channel, we are starting a songwriting challenge on Friday, and I hope that we at least have helped you kind of get a little bit of your creative juices inspired and flowing.
A little kick in the pants.
Yeah, just to get a little kickstart. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, stay mindful, stay musical, and stay out of treble.